At the family dinner, a group of relatives were comparing their children. I'm 25 years old and still studying, while my cousin is a core employee at a listed company. I was being squeezed by my whole family, labeled as a failure and a bookworm. My cousin proudly said, "Our CEO, Bruce, is dining next door and said he wants to come over to meet us." A stern and refined man with cold eyes stepped through the door. He was my ex-boyfriend. I looked up, saw him, and tried to turn away. He reached out and stopped me, his voice icy. "Where are you running off to? Have you done something to hurt me?" Chapter 1. Holding my canvas bag, I stuttered. "No, hello, CEO Bruce, I'm Melissa, Renee's cousin." Ignoring my subtle hints, he glanced over, a hint of chill in his gaze. My mom glared at me, warning tone in her voice. "Melissa, come here, sit down." Dejectedly, I rolled back to my seat, listening to my aunt's warm greetings. "CEO Bruce, we're all family here, let's eat together." "Well, that's impossible, this man is very germophobic." "Sure." I lifted my head suddenly, catching Bruce's smirk. The hint of a smile in his eyes, devoid of warmth, seemed more like a threat. He sat in the main seat vacated for him, right across from me, separated by a table. Aunt called the waiter to bring more dishes and laid out new utensils for Bruce. He didn't touch anything, just casually asked me, "You're Renee's cousin? What's your name?" Before I could reply, Renee spoke up first. "CEO Bruce, this is my sister, Melissa. She's a bit clueless, please excuse her. Melissa is the most useless among our siblings. She's in her 20s and still studying, no manners at all." Aunt shot me a glance, seemingly afraid I might affect Renee's image in Bruce's eyes. "But don't worry, Renee is nothing like her." Bruce raised an eyebrow slightly. "Is that so?" "Yes, Renee is beautiful and polite, now working for CEO Bruce, always the pride of the family." Bruce remained non-committal, his gaze back on me. "Still studying, pursuing a master's?" I replied weakly. "Yes, 3rd year of my master's." "Which school, what's your major?" I turned my head away, pretending not to hear. Mom nudged my soft waist, answering for me. University, Industrial Design." All the fake information I had made up before was completely exposed. Terrified, I watched the almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of Bruce's lips. He always felt like he would pull out a Gatling gun and shoot me next second. And asked, "What information about you is true in front of me, besides your gender?" Lost in thought, Bruce suddenly got up from across the table, bent down slightly, and handed over a business card. "After graduation, come work at our company. There's a new project that needs someone with a high education level, you're suitable for it." Renee suddenly stood up. "Is CEO Bruce referring to the project we're collaborating with Springview Corporation?" But it was clearly stated that I am the one in charge. Bruce had already reached the door, paused upon hearing her words, and replied casually, "Aren't you beautiful and polite? The company needs a receptionist, you'll be transferred there after the new year." Chapter 2. Bruce left the private room. A few words from him silenced our whole family. At that moment, a server entered. "Hello, you mentioned adding some dishes." "Get out." Aunt snapped sharply and then looked at me with a dark expression. "Do you know CEO Bruce?" I shook my head. "Never met him." Renee sat there dazed, as if still not processing everything. She was the family's darling, always pretty since childhood, good at winning adults' hearts, praised at every annual gathering. This year, job hopping for career development, Aunt deliberately booked this New Year's Eve dinner at a 5-star hotel. Originally meant to show off. From heaven to hell in a second, probably describes their feelings tonight. My mom picked up her teacup, took a sip, and leisurely said, "Well, Renee, don't be too sad. After all, working at a listed company as a receptionist is still quite prestigious." My dad glared at her. "Just keep quiet, can't you see Renee is upset?" No tact at all. The New Year's Eve dinner ended on a sour note. Uncle and aunt went to settle the bill with grim faces, my dad rushed after to pay, my mom went to stop him. I was left behind, quietly packing up the unfinished spare ribs, planning to take them to feed stray dogs. As I reached the door of the private room, the lights suddenly dimmed before me. Instinctively, I took a step back, only to see Bruce step in, closing the door behind him. He stared at me, his tone unfriendly. Planning to run again? I tried to play dumb. CEO Bruce, what are you talking about? Should I call you Melissa or Michelle? He tugged at the corner of his lips, giving a cold laugh. Eat and run, leaving no trace behind. Now I'm standing right here, tell me again the reason you gave for breaking up. I apologized weakly. I'm sorry, CEO Bruce. Speak. You're type B blood, and so am I. I'm worried we might end up having a kid who's a total fool. 3 years ago, I said the exact same thing to Bruce. At that time, he foolishly told me that I was mistaken, he wasn't blood type B. I said. Then show me your ID. He actually recited his ID number without missing a beat. I said. Your ID number is different from mine, we're not compatible. And then I cleanly cut ties with him. Coming back to reality, facing Bruce's cold gaze, I gritted my teeth. CEO Bruce, it was wrong of me to deceive you, but we truly aren't suitable. Oh. How are we not suitable? The fortune teller said that if I were with someone named Bruce, there would be a bloody disaster. Bruce suddenly grabbed my wrist, his palm burning hot, making me shiver involuntarily, even my heartbeat quickening. He stared into my eyes and said word by word. If you speak nonsense one more time, there will be a bloody disaster right now. Chapter 3. The lights in the private room shone brightly on his messy black hair. Those good-looking and familiar features, now filled with coldness, made me inexplicably think back to 3 years ago. The room dimmed, and mist from the bathroom drifted out. Bruce helped me dry my hair, and unconsciously, his warm fingers traced down my neck. When he was emotional, the corners of his eyes would slightly redden, reaching the peak of joy, his eyes misting over with a watery haze, like a long spring rain in the mountains. Seductive. Thinking of this, I swallowed nervously. Can't we part on good terms? Just then, my phone rang. It was my mom calling. Melissa, are you feeding stray dogs downstairs again? Come home quickly, it's late. Oh, okay. I hurriedly responded, hung up the phone, and looked at Bruce. My mom is urging me to go home. He didn't let go. Address. Huh? Tell me your home address, then remove me from your blacklist. Bruce's tone was very unfriendly. If you blacklist me again, I'll come to your house and make you watch as I remove myself. Tears in my eyes, I removed him from the blacklist and sent him our home address. To my surprise, Bruce didn't believe me at all. Is this address another one you made up? I was furious. Don't you have any trust in me at all? He sneered. Someone with a history like yours has no right to say such things. Realizing my fault, I silently deleted the fake neighborhood and house number I had just made up, and entered the real address. Bruce put away his phone and left contentedly. Before leaving, he didn't forget to revengefully mess up my hair a bit. On the way back, stepping on the snow, I fell into memories from 3 years ago. At that time, I had just finished my second-year postgraduate entrance exam. Things were very tense with my family, and I hadn't gone home for Chinese New Year. I went on a trip to relax, but ended up caught in a pandemic. I could only stay in the hotel and play games. By a twist of fate, I met Bruce, who was trapped in the room next to mine. Maybe it was the bridge effect, or perhaps the hormones in the enclosed environment were at play. In any case, we were together for a while. Back then, I didn't know Bruce's true identity. In my mind, he was a very handsome man with some extraordinary talents, but also had a lot of quirks. He was very particular about cleanliness, didn't let me speak dirty words, not even during dirty talk, liked to cling tightly while sleeping, and wouldn't allow the lights to be turned off. When the hotel reopened and my exam results came out, I needed to go back to prepare for the retest, so I decided to break up with him. At that time, I thought we would never see each other again in this lifetime. As I walked downstairs, my phone lit up with a new message from Bruce. The time you were drugged during your first year exam, it was your cousin Renee who did it, right? I remained silent for a moment, didn't reply, just put away my phone and went upstairs to open the door. As soon as I entered, I ran into my father, wearing a coat, standing sternly at the entrance. My mom was sitting on the couch, expressionless. The atmosphere inside the house was tense. As soon as my father saw me, he coldly said, "Come out with me now and apologize to your uncle's house. If Renee refuses to forgive you, you won't be spending Chinese New Year in this house." Chapter 4. I didn't respond, silently bent down to change my shoes. As I straightened up, my father's slap came flying towards me. "Are you even listening to me? Do you still have respect for me as your elder?" Even though he didn't hit me hard, even when I tried to dodge, his nails grazed my cheek, leaving 2 bloody marks. As the blood drops fell to the ground, I blinked and suddenly smiled. "Look at you, had you said this earlier, I wouldn't have come back. You little..." My mom, still sitting on the couch, chimed in with a strange tone. "Oh, dragging me into this again. If you like Renee so much, why not adopt her as your daughter-in-law, since you obviously don't fancy our daughter, Melissa? Does she need me to fancy her? Acting like a fox spirit, just one encounter and she's already causing trouble for Bruce, making things difficult for Renee. Renee is so outstanding, where does she fall short compared to her? Boring, truly boring." With my head lowered, I thought, who would believe that a father would use such words to insult his own daughter? Back in high school, I was still young and couldn't understand these things, so I anonymously posted about my family affairs online. Many people replied at that time, making me reflect on myself. After all, every parent loves their child, so if they treat me like this, there must be something wrong with me too. I was thinking day and night at that time, but I just couldn't understand where I had gone wrong. If I couldn't figure it out, I didn't want to think about it. I turned around, opened the door, and said, "I'm leaving, not disturbing your family for Chinese New Year. Who the hell are you threatening? Who do you think you are?" My father's loud yelling was cut off by the sound of the door closing, abruptly stopping. I went downstairs empty-handed, walked to the entrance of the community, took out my phone, and prepared to search for nearby hotels to see if there were any available rooms. "Melissa." Hearing Bruce's voice, I thought it was an illusion. He got out of his black Lamborghini and walked quickly towards me. "Weren't you going home? Why did you come back down?" His gaze fell on the 2 blood marks on my cheek, his expression suddenly darkened. "Who did this to you?" "Accidentally scratched myself." I hesitated to speak and looked at him. "CEO Bruce, why aren't you going back on such a late night? Why are you waiting at my house's door? Scared you'll run away?" He stared at me intensely, as if a creditor who had been owed wages for a long time had finally found the boss who had been evading payment. Only to find out that the other party was about to flee with the money. We were very close to each other, and a fresh woody scent, like honeysuckle, emanated from him. I was briefly distracted, then quickly snapped out of it and started talking nonsense as usual. "I run, you chase, with wings clipped, I can't fly. Where are you going?" This question made me fall silent. After a while, I said dejectedly, "I don't know. Maybe find a hotel to stay for the night and return to school in the morning." But it was the Chinese New Year, the first year I was let loose, and all the hotels in the city were full of tourists and people visiting relatives. It wasn't very convenient to disturb friends at this time. Just as I was thinking, I heard Bruce's voice. "The hotels have no available rooms. If you don't mind, come stay at my place for the night." Chapter 5. Bruce was even wealthier than I had imagined. The Lamborghini drove all the way to the city's most expensive wealthy area, and we took the elevator up to the large flat on the 19th floor. The living room was bigger than 2 of my family's, decorated in extreme simplicity, but you could still tell it was pricey. The most crucial part was that it was spotlessly clean, the floor so clean it could reflect shadows. I stood at the entrance, looking at my dusty cotton slippers, feeling a rare hint of embarrassment. Bruce seemed oblivious, just handed me a pair of new slippers, and then said calmly, "Change into these and come inside. I'll go turn on the water heater for you, take a bath first." I hung my head at the door and rubbed the ground, saying, "Will it disturb Uncle and Auntie? I'm the only one at home." Bruce looked at me, speaking very calmly. "I had a fight with my parents, so I came out to spend the new year alone." With just that simple sentence, my nose inexplicably tingled. 3 years ago, during those 2 months of romance, I guarded all my personal information carefully in front of Bruce. But he had no reservations. On New Year's Eve, we sat together drinking. He asked me why I didn't call home. I was evasive and asked him back, "Why didn't you call either?" He just smiled, his eyes a bit lost, saying, "My parents don't like me." His eyes, misty from alcohol, looked pitiful, like a helpless little puppy. On impulse, I leaned over the table in front of me and kissed him. He was still innocent back then, pushing my shoulder, saying he didn't want a hasty relationship. I held his face, coaxing, and asked him, "Then let's date, okay?" Very formal. That's how that romance began. Melissa. Bruce's voice came through the sound of water, startling me. I turned off the shower. Hearing him say, "Your pajamas are at the door." A set of plain deep gray men's pajamas, I put them on, feeling empty and oversized. As I finished blow-drying my hair, Bruce had already set up drinks on the dining table. I picked up a can of beer and looked at it. "On such a big New Year's, are we just drinking this stuff?" He looked at me and chuckled. "Or do you want to do something else with me?" That statement was very ambiguous. I dared not speak again, pulled the tab on the can, and chugged several big sips. Suddenly, Bruce asked, "Is it because of me?" I choked, coughed twice. "What? The wound on your face, is it because I reassigned Renee, and they're upset?" "Not really. I'm sorry." He looked at me earnestly. "I was just angry and didn't consider your situation." I didn't know what to say, so I ended up holding the beer can in front of my face, saying somewhat hastily, "It has nothing to do with you." Indeed, it had nothing to do with Bruce. In this house, my presence was only to highlight Renee's glamorous life. If she did well, it would only emphasize my incompetence. If she didn't do well, to make her feel better, my dad would find ways to make my life even worse. "This is what I owe your uncle." He had said this countless times. If it wasn't for him dropping out to work and leaving his school spot for me, I wouldn't be where I am today, and you wouldn't even have been born. I owe him for life, and you owe Renee for life. As for my mom, I knew from a very young age that she didn't love me much. I was a chess piece she used to play against my dad, a decoration on the board of her life. When I was young, she was indifferent to me, but later, when she saw my good grades, she started showing me off everywhere. On the eve of my first year of graduate school, Renee put laxatives in my milk, causing me to perform terribly in the exam. My mom was very angry. Ignoring my dad's efforts to calm things down, she insisted on getting justice for me. Until my usually arrogant aunt lowered her pride, knelt in front of her, begging her not to pursue Renee's mistake. The subtle expression on my mom's face, that "I've finally got the upper hand" look, I'll never forget in my life. Later, every time my aunt made her unhappy, she would lightly say, "If it weren't for Melissa's first graduate exam." She didn't need to finish the sentence, just saying that much was enough to make my aunt look like a deflated balloon, her expression suddenly embarrassed. My pain and despair were the weapons she used to counter years of frustration. Very effective, so she used it many times. Thinking about all these messy things, I unconsciously drank a lot, feeling dizzy. In a haze, my body felt light, as if Bruce had picked me up and placed me on the guest bed. With weak hands, I clung to his shoulder and asked vaguely, "CEO Bruce, when we broke up, and I lied to you, do you hate me a lot?" He hesitated for a moment before sitting up. My drunken eyes couldn't see his expression and gaze clearly, only hearing his usual indifferent voice. Yes. I hate you. Chapter 6. I don't have much alcohol tolerance, but I remember fairly clearly what happened after I got drunk. When I woke up, it was already bright outside, and Bruce was nowhere to be seen. I remembered his clear, "I hate you," feeling frightened, so I hurriedly changed clothes and left. Before leaving, I left him a note. "I washed the pajamas in the washing machine, you can take them out and dry them. If you think they're dirty and can't be worn, I'll compensate you with a new one." After leaving, I went home to pack my things. My dad wasn't at home, and my mom was sitting in the living room watching TV. Seeing me come out with an unopened suitcase, she stood up and handed me Bruce's business card. "After graduation, remember to work at CEO Bruce's place. Renee has been gloating for so long, it's time for you to stand up for yourself, right?" I lowered my eyes to the card in her hand, endured for a moment, but couldn't hold back. "Mom, what do you really see me as? A tool to fight against Aunt?" She angrily said. "Melissa, you really don't know what's good for you. Bruce, the CEO of such a big listed company, asking you to work, is it to harm you? Forget it." I put away the business card and said lightly, "I understand." On the first day of the Lunar New Year, I went back to school, and the entire dormitory building was empty, with only me. I was afraid to turn off the lights at night while sleeping. By the 5th day, the dormitory auntie returned. She made dumplings and warmly invited me to eat with her. I held a small bowl, just stuffed a plump sour cabbage dumpling into my mouth when the doorbell rang. The auntie went to open the door, then quickly returned, smiling and winking at me. "There's a handsome guy looking for you." I was still thinking which junior student had come back and was looking for me to open the lab door. But as I walked out, chewing on the dumpling, I came face to face with Bruce's icy gaze. In a panic, I swallowed the dumpling, wiped my mouth with a tissue, and heard his cold voice. "Keep running." Feeling guilty, I asked, "Is there a reason why CEO Bruce is at our school?" "To find you." With his hands in his pockets, looking indifferent, he said, "Didn't you say you wanted to compensate me for the pajamas? How much?" "I'll transfer it to you via WeChat. 26,000. I burst into tears right there in front of the dormitory building. "Bruce, this is extortion. Aren't you calling me a CEO now?" A hint of a smile actually flickered in his eyes. "I didn't lie to you, the purchase records are still there." Then he spat out a long string of incomprehensible words, probably the name of a luxury brand I had never heard of. Gritting my teeth, I asked, Can I pay in installments?" Bruce thought for a moment, then said, "That's possible, but with a condition." His condition was that after I graduated in June, I would work at his company. I thought again about that clear, "I hate you," I heard when I was drunk. I always felt he was trying to get back at me for lying to him and dumping him, wanting to keep me close and slowly torment me. But Bruce set up a formal process, asking me to send him a resume, arranging first and second round interviews, and eventually sending me an offer letter with a very generous salary. He said, "I don't want others to think you got in because of my connections." I asked him weakly, "But didn't I?" "Of course not." The sunlight came through the car window, he turned his head, gently smiled at me. "I want you to come because you are a top graduate student at L University, an outstanding student who has received the Principal's Award. Believe in your excellence, Melissa." My heart suddenly couldn't control its rapid beating. Chapter 7. That afternoon, I was editing my thesis when Renee suddenly messaged me, saying she was waiting for me at the school gate. "I'm busy." "What, do you need me to have Uncle come and invite you?" I randomly grabbed a jacket and headed out. When Renee saw me, she showed a calm and firm smile. "I saw the offer the company gave you, Melissa, you're not really planning to come work, are you?" I replied expressionlessly. "What's it to you? Just focus on being the receptionist." Her smile froze, and after a moment, she said somewhat impatiently, "Do you think it's amazing that you hooked up with CEO Bruce? He's just playing around with you. CEO Bruce has had a fiancée for a long time, a proper lady from a wealthy family. Don't you feel pathetic? I nodded, suddenly understanding. You're so concerned about his marital affairs, it seems like you like your CEO Bruce, huh? Renee sneered. Don't rush to label me. Although I dislike you, we're still sisters. If you really become his mistress, I'll be embarrassed too. She hailed a car and dragged me to a restaurant. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I quickly spotted Bruce, sitting across from a curly-haired woman in a red dress. Bruce was in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, in a relaxed and lazy posture. The woman opposite him seemed to say something. Bruce, who had a strong sense of cleanliness, picked up a crab and carefully removed the meat, placing it all on her plate. Renee proudly said, "See that? That's CEO Bruce's official fiancée." I observed seriously for a moment and commented, "CEO Bruce's skills are not that great." Renee looked puzzled. Crabs shouldn't be dismantled like that, a lot of meat is being wasted. Not getting the reaction she expected from me, Renee was clearly very dissatisfied. "Melissa, you're my sister, you don't need to pretend in front of me. I know you're feeling uncomfortable, but have you ever thought, with just your looks and abilities, how could CEO Bruce possibly give up his beautiful, well-matched fiancée to be with you?" Yes, you're right. I nodded perfunctorily. "Nothing, I'll go back first, my thesis isn't finished yet, I'm busy." Then I turned and left in a taxi. Sitting in the car, I gave the driver the address. I shrank in my seat, rubbing my chest. There was a sharp pain, but it quickly weakened. When I got back at night, I finished editing my thesis, and it was already late. Before going to bed, I scrolled through a social media platform and unexpectedly came across the familiar curly hair and red dress. Bruce's fiancée, seemingly a wealthy lady from a prominent family. She hadn't posted much, just a dozen or so, all depicting a life beyond the reach of ordinary people. The latest one was located in the city's most luxurious five-star hotel, in the President's Suite on the 68th floor. The image showed her extremely beautiful face, and in the corner, the dim light reflected off a laptop screen. There was also a man's hand holding a mouse, clearly a man's hand. With the caption, "Spending a wonderful night together," followed by a toast emoji. The comments section was filled with envy and praise, so after some thought, I also posted, "100 years of happiness." Chapter 8. When I was very young, I actually held an undying hope for my parents' love. After learning from books and friends how other parents treated their children, I would repeatedly experiment on them. Naturally, it yielded no results. In the end, I had lost hope and learned to keep silent in that empty home. 3 years ago, when I broke up with Bruce, it wasn't because I got tired of playing. On the contrary, it was because I was horrified to find that I had developed feelings. In this relationship built on lust and deception, I found myself unable to hold back my true feelings. What should I do next? After some time, should I ask Bruce, who was already tired of me, for favor and pity? So I ran away. I didn't expect to meet Bruce again. And after meeting him again, the suppressed feelings seemed to be rekindling. The night before my thesis defense, he messaged me. "Let's have dinner together after your defense tomorrow." I didn't reply. The next morning, he sent another message. "Are you awake?" At 10 in the morning, another one. "Has it started? Don't be nervous." 11 o'clock. "You ran away again, didn't you?" I was disgusted by this person disturbing my peace, so I simply turned off my phone. Fortunately, my graduation thesis was well prepared. Even my usually strict supervisor couldn't find fault, and I completed the defense smoothly, with the teachers present showing signs of satisfaction. I thanked them with a bow, carrying my notebook back to the dormitory. I immediately saw Bruce standing downstairs. He had a dark expression and gritted his teeth as soon as he saw me. "You turned off your phone. Why didn't you just block me like you did 3 years ago?" I pondered for a moment. "It's not impossible." Bruce's face darkened even more. "You dare? Do you have something to tell me, CEO Bruce?" Bruce frowned, looked me up and down for a moment, seemed like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he held it back. He only said, "I've reserved a table at a restaurant to celebrate the end of your defense. You're free for the rest of the day." I was prepared to decline. "Thank you for your kind offer, CEO Bruce, but it's the Italian restaurant you mentioned in your previous social media post, where you wanted to eat but couldn't get a reservation." I swallowed hard, tears in my eyes, and said, "But I'm really hungry now. Let's go now." Anyway, he was planning to get back at me, so having a final meal together wasn't too much, right? I enjoyed the meal with the thought of not having a next meal, while Bruce sat across from me, peeling shrimp. The fresh and plump shrimp meat dipped in sauce was placed on a plate in front of me. The corner of his lips curved into a faint smile, as if feeding a small animal, saying, "If you like it, eat more." If I hadn't seen him personally feeding his fiancée a crab that day, I might have been briefly moved and disoriented. After eating and drinking to my heart's content, I drank most of a bottle of wine, and in the end, I sat dizzily in Bruce's newly bought orange-red Palomilla. He drove, I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes, and remained silent. Finally, the car stopped outside the school gates, and the cold wind blew in through the window gap, gradually awakening my senses. Even before I opened my eyes, I felt a warm touch on my lips. The next moment, I pushed Bruce away abruptly. In his somewhat flustered yet feigned calm expression, I wiped my lips and raised my eyes. "Bruce, don't you think what you did was disgusting?" The color drained from his face bit by bit, and he stared straight at me for a while before speaking somewhat awkwardly. "What are you talking about?" Chapter 9. 3 years ago, I deceived you with false information. I didn't approach our relationship seriously from the beginning, and I admit it was wrong of me. I was initially attracted by your looks and acted on impulse to seduce you. After we broke up, I didn't tell you the truth either, so it's normal for you to resent me. If you want revenge, you could use your connections to block my graduation certificate, or make things difficult for me once I join your company. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and tried to suppress the trembling in my voice. Seeking revenge through emotions, aren't you afraid of harming yourself more than your enemy? Are you being fair to your fiancé? Bruce was stunned. After a while, he asked in a low voice. "What fiancé?" I expected him to deny it, so I took out my phone, found the short video, and handed it to him. Bruce watched for a couple of seconds, his expression gradually turning strange. "Why do you think she's my fiancé? No tears until the coffin is lowered?" I was furious, so I confronted him directly. "That day, I saw you both at a nearby restaurant. I saw you even feeding her crab, although your skills were terrible and wasted a lot of crab meat." Bruce took a deep breath. "You didn't have to say that last part." He leaned over to fasten my seatbelt, then drove to a villa. Lights were on in the windows, and Bruce asked me to wait in the car while he went to knock on the door. After a while, a familiar woman with a disgruntled face came to open the door. Her curly hair was a bit messy, and her silk nightgown was wrinkled. Looking very displeased, she started scolding as soon as she saw him. "Bruce, did a donkey kick your brain this late at night? You, the lonely CEO, staying alone every day, while I still have dates." Bruce kept a cold face. "There's a misunderstanding that needs your help to resolve." Then he dragged her to the car. "Be gentle, my skin is delicate, don't be so rough when asking for help." The woman was pulled over, looked around the car, and suddenly laughed. "Got a new car? This flashy color doesn't really match your personality. Some people like it." Bruce opened the car door, revealing a slightly tipsy me. The woman smiled knowingly, extending a hand towards me. "Hello, I'm Bruce's sister, Verna." I looked incredulous. She hastened. "It's true, we have the same parents, no doubt about it." Bruce said. "I invited you to dinner that day, and she saw it." Verna suddenly realized. "Oh, last month, Bruce needed my help with something, so he invited me to dinner. He noticed my new nail job and helped me crack the crab very attentively. But his skills were terrible, wasting a lot of crab meat." Bruce's forehead veins bulged. You didn't need to say that last part, did you? It was all just a misunderstanding. I awkwardly pressed the icy back of my hand against my cheek, feeling a rare sense of embarrassment. Frowning, Bruce asked. Who's the person in the short video you posted? My new boyfriend. Why, do you want to meddle in that too? Verna didn't hold back, raising her chin. I'm not like some old virgin, finally dating at an old age only to get dumped. Bruce, you're embarrassing yourself. Don't say you're my brother when you go out in the future. After saying this, she waved her hand and went inside. As the door closed, I saw a tall figure standing in the entrance hall, who lowered their head to kiss Verna as soon as she entered. It seems like we really disturbed her. Bruce sat in the car, facing me in silence for a while. His voice was somewhat cold. Don't you have something to say? I hung my head dejectedly. I'm sorry. So you shut me out and ignored me, thinking I had a fiancé? I wanted to be defiant, but under his serious gaze, I nodded in the end. What was the matter you asked your sister to handle? He chuckled lightly. It's a secret, can't tell you yet. Suddenly, I remembered something important. Do I need to compensate for the pajamas? Melissa, can you focus on our matters? I said disheartened, I am thinking about our matters, isn't that your pajama? Shut up. The next moment, he leaned in to kiss me, the car lights casting a soft glow, his lips gently moving against mine, gradually heating up. Resting his forehead against mine, he breathed heavily. Won't be going back to school tonight, okay? I tried to negotiate. Can I at least say some dirty talk to spice things up? Bruce furrowed his brows. Playing hard to get, I said. Forget it, I won't make it hard for you, I'll just go back to school. He blinked hesitantly and compromised. Fine. Chapter 10. In the courtyard of the suburban villa, moonlight shone on the swing. In the middle of the glass conservatory was a round hot spring pool. I grabbed Bruce, looking at his reddened eyes, and ordered. Call me husband. He gritted his teeth. Melissa, don't push it. I withdrew my hand, feeling bland. Forget it, if you're so unwilling, I can do without you. In the moment I turned around, an arm reached out from behind, hooked around my waist, and together we plunged into the hot spring pool. Amidst the splashing water, he pressed me against the edge of the hot spring pool, mist gathering in his eyes. It's too late to run now. The next day when I woke up, Bruce asked me why I went to a restaurant so far away instead of working on my paper at school. Wrapped in a blanket, I lazily curled up on the couch. I think you should be able to guess. It's Renee again. Bruce's face darkened. When she drugged you and made you miss your exam, you should have reported her. I laughed. Report her? My mom took my phone, pointed at my nose, scolded me, saying she finally let off some steam, and if I reported her, how would she hold this over my aunt's head? I didn't tell Bruce the details of this incident 3 years ago. Bringing it up now, it didn't evoke the same anger and sadness as before. Just a sense of indifference remained. With that said, I decided to be honest with Bruce. At first, fabricating lies to you became a habit. I couldn't bring myself to tell an outsider about my family's abnormal situation. And breaking up later was because of this. Before you, there was someone else. I had a crush on him for years, I couldn't even speak up. Then he said he liked me too, and I felt scared. Any normal person who knew about my family wouldn't choose me, right? So when he confessed, I rejected him. Look, in matters of love, I'm just a terrible person like that. Bruce pursed his lips, his jaw tightening, his eyes icy. I wanted to tell him that I didn't break up because I didn't like him. But because I found myself unintentionally falling for him, not knowing how to sustain a healthy intimate relationship. I didn't have confidence that a relationship based on the bridge effect, built on lies, could really last. To my surprise, the more he listened, the darker his face became. You liked someone else? I tried to explain. It was just a college crush, we never even got together. His eyes showed a hint of grievance, insisting. No, you can't like anyone else. I've only liked you, you should only like me. Bruce really got clingy. I rubbed my temples. That's all in the past, of course, I only like you now. Say it again. That's all in the past. Just the second half. I paused for a few seconds and then realized. You clearly said you hate me. But I'm easily placated. Sitting across from me, Bruce grabbed my wrist and rubbed it, inching closer. With the calmest and most indifferent expression, he said the most spineless words. As long as you don't leave me and run away again, I will always love you. Forever and ever, I won't change my mind. Chapter 11. Later, I mocked him, saying he really lacked the domineering aura of a CEO, more like a clingy little dog. He leaned over to kiss me and whispered. Would you be willing to have another pet dog? Help. Facing Bruce like this, I often felt like an old beast. At the end of March, I joined Bruce's company. Coincidentally, those days he had to go on a business trip, and before leaving, he specifically instructed me to have a senior member of the project team familiarize me with the business. After joining, I soon noticed that many colleagues in the department looked at me strangely. Soon, through office gossip in the pantry, I found out the reason. I heard the new girl, Melissa, is the CEO Bruce's mistress? Huh? Wasn't she a top student at L University? Top students have no shame and no limits. Faced with a talented young man like CEO Bruce, they know he has a fiancée but still shamelessly throw themselves at him? With a bang, I pushed the door open and looked at the two men and two women inside and smiled. Who's throwing themselves at whom? How do you know CEO Bruce has a fiancée? Did you eavesdrop under his bed? The woman with short hair on the edge yelled. Stop pretending in front of us. Renee personally saw it. Saw what? Saw CEO Bruce and his fiancée having dinner together, and saw you flirting with him, deliberately seducing him. I casually took out my phone from my pocket. All right, it's all recorded. When CEO Bruce comes back, bring Renee, and go ask him yourself. The four people in front of me all had changed expressions. Sure enough, after work in the afternoon, Renee came over to me on her own. With a look of sadness, she said to me, Melissa, we are sisters with blood ties, do you have to treat me this way? After so many years, her ability to distort the truth remained as strong as ever. I remembered when I was only 4, naive and innocent, she handed me a small cake, and without much thought, I ate it. Later, Renee went to complain to my dad, saying I stole her small cake. With tears in her eyes, 6-year-old Renee choked up and asked, Uncle, now that you have a sister, will you stop liking me the most? Of course not. My dad scolded me for a few sentences and then picked up Renee, soothing her softly. Renee will always be Uncle's little princess. If you want to eat a cake, Uncle will take you to buy it. In the following 20+ years, I never heard my dad speak to me in such a gentle and meticulous tone. Thinking about this, I smiled and coldly said, Don't act like a saint in front of me. I'm not Uncle. I won't fall for it. Renee stiffened and put on a pleading expression. Regardless, you're my sister, the only high achiever in our family. How can I stand by and watch you ruin your reputation like this? You didn't say that on New Year's Eve, though. I clicked my tongue. I remember clearly, you called me a bookworm, impolite. Remember when you put laxatives in my milk, said that besides good grades, I had no worth, that you wanted to crush my only hope. Now it's your turn, Renee. I directly sent that recording to the company group. Silence. Not a single soul dared to speak. Until the evening, Bruce probably finished his dinner and mentioned to HR. Draft a dismissal email for Miss Renee, and hire a new receptionist. Renee pretended to be calm. CEO Bruce, I haven't violated any company rules. Firing me like this is against the labor law. Quite surprising. She even knew labor law. Bruce said, Don't worry, I'll pay you the legal compensation for dismissal, but with your character, you can't continue working here. Oh, and about the false parts on your resume at the beginning, I wasn't planning to investigate, but now I've changed my mind. He instructed HR. If any company calls for a reference, do tell them the truth about Renee. Chapter 12. After witnessing the entire process of Renee's dismissal. When I left work that day, the 4 people in the pantry came to apologize to me one by one, saying they couldn't recognize the boss's wife. Feeling uneasy, I discussed it with Bruce when I got home. Let's forget about it, I don't want to work here under your shadow. It really looks like nepotism, I said. But, I got into graduate school on my own, published research papers on my own, and I can find a very good job on my own. Okay. Bruce had already mastered my bargaining skills. If we can't see each other every day at the office, how about moving in with me, okay? I hesitated. But your suburban villa is really far away. His eyes lit up, handing me the car keys. No problem, that orange-red Pamela was originally meant for you. You mentioned liking it 3 years ago. I remembered. Darn it. A man with such cunning intentions. Who could resist an orange-red Pamela? I took the keys and remembered something else. But I had planned to live on my own after graduation, just to bring home that stray dog I've been feeding. Bruce, who was very particular about cleanliness, frowned and reluctantly said, "It's okay, I've always wanted to have a dog too." Driving the newly acquired Pamela, I went to buy a pet carrier and some supplies, planning to go back to pick up the dog. I even came up with a name for it in advance, calling it Pudding. Unexpectedly, I ran into my dad downstairs. As soon as he saw me, his face darkened, and he walked over quickly, questioning. "Did you cause Renee to lose her job?" Holding the pet carrier, I calmly replied. "She's a gossip who spread rumors about the boss behind his back, she deserves it." "You have the nerve to say that? If it weren't for you, Renee would have had a bright future. How could she have fallen to this state today?" "Melissa, don't be so selfish. Fine, she failed an exam before, you thought my good grades were too much for her. Now she lost her job, and you blame me again. If Renee dies young tomorrow, will you blame me for not saving her life?" My dad was furious, raised his hand and slapped me across the face. "Melissa, who are you cursing?" The slap was too strong and too quick, I couldn't dodge it, and I even tasted a faint sweet metallic taste in my mouth. With a ringing in my ears, I lifted the pet carrier in my hand and smashed it towards my dad. The sharp edges scraped his cheek, the wounds that had appeared on me many times, now appeared on his face. Just much worse than before. My dad, in a rage, tried to retaliate, but was stopped by several neighbors who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion. One uncle downstairs shouted, "Melissa is already a grown-up, a young girl, do you really want to beat her to death?" Finally, my dad glared at me fiercely and went upstairs. I squatted down, and a yellow-white stray dog joyfully ran out of the bushes, rubbing its head vigorously in my palm. I had just put it in the carrier when I saw my mom. She walked up to me and said indifferently, "You've grown capable, now you dare to hit your dad." I just, in response, picked up the carrier and headed towards the parking lot. My mom followed me all the way to Pamela, then her eyes suddenly lit up. "You really have some skills now, is this a gift from CEO Bruce? It's strange to say, with such a big company, how did he set his sights on you?" Before I could answer, she continued. "Never mind, whatever his reasons, make the most of the opportunity. After being bullied by Renee for so many years, you finally have a chance to shine. Next time I have a class reunion, you drive this car back to pick me up." I opened the car door, carefully placed Pudding inside, then turned to look at her. "No. I'm not coming back." My mom looked displeased. "Your dad hit you, I didn't, did I? During the New Year's dinner, when you didn't want to talk to CEO Bruce, wasn't it me who smoothed things over for you?" This is said too absurdly, I couldn't help but laugh. You know what? I actually stopped caring about how my dad treats me a long time ago. I just couldn't accept it, feeling like we were connected by blood for 10 months, why couldn't you love me, but only see me as a tool for showing off? I touched my cheek where the hot and painful slap mark was with the back of my hand. But now, none of this matters, I don't care about you anymore. Reading too much, you speak such unfilial words, there's some twisted reasoning in what you're saying. My mom sneered. No matter what, you crawled out of my belly, Melissa, you owe me a life. If I could choose, I would never choose you to be my mother. I stared at her and said word by word. I really wish I could tear you apart, and give that life back to you. She met my gaze, stunned for a moment, cursed under her breath, then turned and walked away. I got into the car, closed the door forcefully, and saw tears that had yet to fall in the rearview mirror. The love and sacrifices of others can never be forced. The person I envied most as a child was Renee, at least when facing her, uncles and aunts always showed unconditional favoritism and protection. These things that came so easily to her were illusions I could never catch up to in my entire life. But thankfully, I had grown up. There are some things that you can still live without even if you didn't get them. Chapter 13. When I returned, it was already evening. Bruce was waiting for me at the door, and his expression turned cold when he saw the swollen handprint on my cheek. If you tell me this was an accident again, don't blame me for coming to visit you at your home. I held my dirty little dog and said quietly. It was my dad who hit me. But I fought back, he got hurt worse than me. Bruce's voice was filled with anger and frustration. Is it because of me firing Renee? It doesn't matter. Even without this incident, there would be another time when Renee wasn't happy. Anyway, if she's in a bad mood, it must be my fault. But, from now on, I won't go back. I finally suppressed the urge to cry, looked up at Bruce, and said, take me home. Bruce held my hand, carried the dirty pudding, and walked into the villa with a serious expression. His cleanliness obsession was severe, but he never let go of my hand throughout. Pudding sensed his mood and licked his hand in a friendly manner. Bruce's expression turned even darker. For my wife's sake, I forgive this offense of yours this time. He talked to the dog. From now on, until you're clean, don't touch me. Pudding tilted its head, looked at him for a while, then suddenly stuck out its tongue and licked his cheek. He stood up abruptly, took it to the bathroom, then walked out with a grim face. When are you going to give it a bath? That night, I cleaned the little stray dog thoroughly and placed its bed next to mine. Bruce brought over an ice pack for me to apply on my face, looking down with his eyelashes drooping, and asked me. If you ever go back there again, take me with you, okay? Why, are you going back to fight my dad with me? I smiled, which tugged at the wound on my cheek, causing a sharp pain. Bruce's voice was cold. He doesn't deserve to be called your dad. Let's not talk about that. I started to fidget restlessly. I'm not sleepy at all tonight, why don't we try to get some rest together? Dear? Bruce's throat rolled up and down, his eyes reddening at the corners. Don't call me that. Dear, my face hurts. I whimpered. The ice pack isn't working, we need a warm compress. Bruce looked at me, blinked, and once he understood what I meant, his ears turned red. Melissa, you. I cupped his face and kissed him, imitating his tone from 3 years ago. Don't say those words, they're vulgar. What if someone hears and it affects us badly? After mimicking him, I couldn't help but laugh. Yes, I know, I'm not very reserved. But this is your villa, you're so old-fashioned, no one will hear. Silence for a moment. Bruce suddenly leaned in, whispered a few words in my ear. The hot breath sprayed on my ear, then down my neck, making me itch. The mist thickened, flowing out of his affectionate eyes, blending with the moonlight, gently covering every corner of the room. Chapter 14. Sometime later, the uncle who had stopped my dad from hitting me last time suddenly messaged me on WeChat. Melissa, your dad has been taken away by the police. I was shocked and relieved at once. What happened? It seems your dad was playing cards with someone, they owed him a few $100 and refused to pay. Your dad, a bit drunk and getting angrier, went to demand the money with a knife. The neighbor uncle said. It's a big deal or a small one, if the other party refuses to reconcile, your dad might end up charged with robbery. Your mom is talking about divorcing him. This might have something to do with Bruce, or maybe not. But they were all unimportant people. I didn't even have the thought to ask him for confirmation. During this time, Renee's job search was still not going well. She had lied on her resume, had a history of spreading rumors about her previous boss, and after background checks, not many companies were willing to hire her. I don't know what Renee was thinking, but when she ran out of options, she actually came to Bruce, trying to cozy up to him. I'm Melissa's sister, even prettier than her. What does a bookworm like her know? Since CEO Bruce doesn't even find fault with Melissa, why not consider me? That night, when Bruce returned, his expression was extremely grim. After taking a shower, he came out and hugged me. She threw herself into my arms, and I immediately pushed her away, even throwing away my coat. His tone was as cold as if it could produce ice shards. I comfortingly touched his hair. Renee is at least a beauty. When she threw herself at you, didn't you feel anything? Yes. He said. I felt like throwing up. Bruce continued. I hate Renee. I blinked. Actually, what she said wasn't entirely unreasonable. While it's true I have some looks, you've been in the business world for so long, you must have seen many beautiful women. Why would you like me? I thought Bruce might reveal some secret from our childhood that we had seen before. Unexpectedly, he lowered his eyelashes and said softly. We are alike. When I was young, my dad took on a new lover, and my mom decisively filed for divorce. But she only took my sister with her, saying I was just like my dad, both from the Carter family's trash lineage. My dad quickly remarried and had a son, but he didn't pay much attention to me. Sometimes when I made him unhappy, he would lock me in a closet all night. That's why he was afraid of the dark and never wanted to sleep with the lights off. My eyes felt sour, and a slight pain spread in my heart. But that's not your fault. It's the adult's business, and it has nothing to do with you. Bruce came over and hugged me. I've grown up, I won't dwell on these meaningless things anymore. When I was locked in the hotel, maybe it was because of a similar aura that I noticed you at first sight. Later, when you asked me out for a drink and said you wanted to date me, you don't know how happy I was. He rested his head on my shoulder, like pudding, affectionately rubbing his cheek against mine. Don't leave me again, Melissa. I can't bear another 3 years without you. A short separation is better than a new marriage. The polished glass window faintly reflected the sweat on my forehead. The 3-year gap seemed impossible to completely fill. In June, I went back to school to attend the graduation ceremony. Among the fluttering ribbons, I went on stage as an outstanding graduate and ran into Bruce right away. He was holding a large bouquet of sunflowers, smiling at me. Congratulations on your graduation, Melissa. I took the bouquet and carefully observed his expression. You seem nervous? He swallowed nervously, then quietly took out a small box from his pocket. Opening it, a platinum ring on black velvet, surrounded by various sizes of diamonds, with a central pink diamond that dazzled the eyes. It's a collector's grade pink diamond. After inviting my sister to dinner and giving her another contract, she agreed to sell it to me. I also had a designer help design the ring. Bruce anxiously and hopefully looked at me. Melissa, will you marry me? So, this was what he had asked Verna's help for. I said yes, to him. I have always believed that everyone's good luck is equal. Fate did not give me a happy family or parents who unconditionally loved me. But it gave me a sharp mind, learning, and working abilities equal to anyone else. As for emotional deficiencies, I entrusted them all to Bruce to fill. Loved ones, even if far apart, can reunite. End of main text.
Extra story, Bruce, harmonica tune. When my mom left this home with my sister, everything was tidied up. Only a harmonica was left behind. Long ago, before my dad had an affair, before our home turned completely unfamiliar. Back then, my mom used to have my sister and me sit side by side on the couch, playing harmonica tunes for us. Most of those tunes were gentle and delicate, so much so that later, when she pointed at me with a face full of hatred, cursing me as trash from the Carter family's bloodline, I stood frozen in place. Verna, we're leaving. She shot me a look of disgust and never looked back. Later, I tried to pick up that harmonica, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't play the tune she had played back then. After she left, the Carter family became my nightmare. Taking over the family business, I spent 9 years from the age of 17, step by step making it my own. After becoming the largest shareholder of the company, my dad could only come to me for money to support his wife and kids, and his attitude changed a lot. I couldn't let him love me. Many years later, Melissa and I huddled in a hotel room, wrapped in the same blanket, watching Harry Potter. In the movie, Harry Potter lived in a cupboard under the stairs, dust falling when people walked up and down the stairs, reminding me of the nights I spent curled up in a closet. Melissa accidentally touched me, surprised. "Your hands are so cold." I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, she grabbed my hand, slipping hers under her own skirt. "Come, let me warm you up." The soft, warm touch felt like a breeze on a spring branch, as if in the blink of an eye, it had rounded the luscious cherries. The light fell into her eyes, a watery gleam. She smiled and leaned in to kiss me, casually turning off the iPad and placing it on the table. "Let's not watch anymore. Play with me first, my dear." She always liked to change how she addressed me, and this had become the most normal one. The more bizarre ones were left for those chaotic nights. During those times, she would often act recklessly, saying and doing whatever she pleased. She would tie my hands with a tie, forcing me to call her by those strange names. She would tie pretty and secure bows, pushing me to my limits before letting go. And she would. But during the day, she would return to her listless self, like a timid yet lecherous, crumpled squirrel. This contradictory and strange combination held an inexplicable and deadly allure to me. It would remind me of the first time I saw her. The hotel had just informed us about the quarantine measures, so we went down to the lobby to collect supplies. She wore fluffy rabbit ear pajamas, huddled in a corner of the elevator lost in thought. After collecting supplies, there were 2 little girls nearby. Their parents gave the only box of yogurt to the younger sister, while the older sister lagged behind, looking envious, with a face that seemed like she wanted to cry but couldn't. She took out her own yogurt, glanced at it, and said, "Why is it this brand? I hate drinking this stuff, too sweet." Then she handed the yogurt to her sister, with a cold face, commanding her, "You, get rid of the yogurt I don't like for me." The next night, I saw her on the balcony next door. She was still wearing that fluffy oversized pajama, standing on the balcony lost in thought. I heard her muttering to herself, "I'm craving yogurt, I wonder if there will be more tomorrow." Forget it, how can I snatch things to drink from little girls? I've grown up. Through the glass, I saw her raise her fist, thump her chest, then take out a harmonica from the pocket of her pajamas. I didn't know what tune she was going to play, so I watched her curiously. And then she played a hero's song. After playing, she patted the balcony railing as if relieved, saying, "When you see injustice, you must shout. When it's time to act, you must act. The words have been spoken, there's no turning back." I stood behind the glass, watching her fluffy figure enter the room and disappear from my sight. Later, we got together. I casually mentioned that day's harmonica, and she looked at me embarrassedly, saying, That was just for fun, I don't really know many tunes. If you like, I can play Castle in the Sky for you." The second song she played was a bit stumbling, not really that pleasant to listen to. After putting down the harmonica, she pounced on me, humming, "Honey, I played a song for you, how will you reward me?" Strangely, after that day, I never dreamt of the unknown harmonica tune from my childhood or the dark closet of the past 10 years. I wanted to marry her. That thought only came to me when the hotel reopened. But in just one night, she was gone. I messaged her many times, and after a long while, she replied, "Let's break up, Bruce." I stood frozen in place, all the sleepless nights of anxiety about proposing and the fantasies of a long future shattered in a second. Forcing myself to calm down, I asked her, "Why?" She gave me 2 seemingly random excuses and then blocked me directly. I had someone look into it, but whether it was the name Michelle or the address and company she gave me, nothing could be found. I met with my sister, and she looked at her newly done nails, mocking me. She just doesn't trust you. I do the same with my little boyfriends, just playing around. If you give real information and they get attached, you can't shake them off. Is that true? I refused to believe it, stubbornly looking at her. Keep the diamond for me. Someday, I will find her. She rolled her eyes. Old tree blooming is just trouble, you don't even have a photo, it's a miracle if you find her. Time passed day by day, and in 3 years, I never saw her again. Until Chinese New Year. Many people in the company group were showing off their New Year's Eve dinner, and as I sat in the car scrolling through a few pictures, I saw her. Sitting in a corner, slightly hunched over, she was focused on gnawing on the ribs in her hand. She appeared humble, but we had spent 2 months together day and night, and I could almost instantly detect the weariness in her eyes. The person posting the photos was Renee, a new employee who had joined the company a few months ago. If I remembered correctly, there were some issues with her resume. So, I inquired about the address, pretending I was also dining there, and then quickly drove over. The next second after pushing the door open, I was met with her shocked and incredulous gaze. She grabbed the tattered canvas bag she had been carrying for 3 years and was about to leave, saying, "I suddenly have something to do, I'll leave first." "Melissa, come here and sit down." The woman next to her, scolding her with a cold face, bore some resemblance to her, probably her mother. But there was no love in her eyes. Not to mention the group of relatives who shamelessly belittled her in front of me. My intuition from 3 years ago was not wrong. She and I were the same kind of people. After she left, I sluggishly returned to the car, her faint warm scent still lingering on my fingertips, instantly pulling me back to many tender nights in the past. There was only a dim light on the bedside, and she panted as she sat up, pulling the tie over, covering my eyes. Deprived of sight, in darkness, the experiences of other senses were infinitely magnified. The vulgar and frivolous, even obscene words that came out of her mouth seemed more like some kind of pent-up release. She didn't want to sink alone, she wanted to drag me down too. But after pulling me into the abyss, she escaped alone. I did have resentment towards her, but after the initial bitterness, all that resurfaced was longing. I frequently dreamed of her, dreaming of several days when she sat by the window writing something. I asked her, and she would smile and say, "It's work-related stuff, the company asked me to make a table." And the first time we talked, I was actually a bit nervous, but she confidently reached out her hand. "I'm Michelle. I'm 22 this year, working at Springview Corporation, just a small employee." One day, the staff bought us alcohol, and she drank a bit too much, suddenly leaned over to kiss me, then pulled out a small box from her pocket. In fact, I also asked them to help me buy this. "Do you want to use it with me, My heart suddenly raced, but as I met her intoxicated eyes, I suddenly became worried. Worried that this was just a momentary impulse for her. But she cupped my face with gentle hands and whispered softly, "Then let's date, okay?" Very seriously. All the information she shared with me was false. She never thought about a future with me. Just like that harmonica that was never truly mine, just happened to be found by me. Yet, it felt like an intoxicatingly beautiful dream. I began to realize, even if I could never find her for a lifetime, I would never forget her again. Fortunately, luck was on my side. Under the moonlight that night, in the Glass Flower House's hot spring pool, she trembled as she leaned in for a kiss. In the splashing water, the familiar touch engulfed me in an instant. The next day, she finally admitted she liked me. After she said those words, I realized that all along, I just wanted her to include me in her future. As long as she still liked me, I didn't care about the past. I did my best to reach out from the dark closet and saw another scarred star. Though dim, it still shone a light on me for a moment. And once I grabbed hold of it, I wouldn't let go.
Bonus after marriage, piano piece. Bruce had an incomprehensible passion for spending money on me. That night, I was curled up on the couch watching videos, and happened to see news about a new car model being released. I found the color quite appealing and casually hit the like button. The next day during dinner, he suddenly said, "I've ordered it." With half a shrimp in my mouth, I looked up in confusion, asking. Ordered what? He placed the crab meat he had picked out onto my plate and calmly said. The bright pink Ferrari, the one you like, there happened to be a slot available, so I used it. He made it sound as simple as buying a cup of coffee for millions. I was shocked and asked. Can it be cancelled? Why would you cancel? It's too extravagant, you know, if I drive that Ferrari to work now, I'll be rumored to be a rich girl out experiencing life. Some even say my quick promotion is because I'm the chairman's daughter. It was too absurd. My dad didn't have that kind of power. The last time, he spent over $100,000 just to convince the other party to agree to a private settlement. When he came back, he had a big argument with my mom, nearly ended up divorcing, and on the day they went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get the divorce certificate, he got into a car accident and lost a leg. To have someone take care of him, he refused to divorce, and that's how he and my mom kept at each other. My mom even tried to come to me for help, but luckily, the security at the villa area and the company are good, so she couldn't get in. As for Renee, in the end, she reluctantly joined a small company, made it to 30, hastily married someone. The man wasn't very capable, boasted a lot before marriage, and now after marriage, they rely on her meager salary to get by. Two people argue 20 times a month, she goes back to her parents' house every day, and in the end, the uncles and aunts had to use their retirement pension to support them. Bruce handed me a piece of red sugar cake and said. Just jealous of your work ability. The last time I worked with your company, I saw the proposal you made. Even the most senior project manager couldn't find any faults. Don't change the subject. I glared at him, and Bruce helplessly smiled. You've been driving that car for years, it's normal to change to a new one. We earn so much money, and we don't plan on having children. If I don't spend it on you, are we going to leave it all for Renee's son in the future? When he said that, I suddenly felt it made a lot of sense. So, on the weekend, I dragged Bruce out for shopping. Before leaving, Pudding bit my pant leg with teary eyes, refusing to let go. I tried to reason with it. Sweetie, Mom really can't take you out, pets aren't allowed in the mall. As a result, Bruce directly squatted down with a black face. Let go. Do you know that disturbing someone's private date will lead to no canned food for you? Pudding ignored him and just stared at me with a sad expression. I had to tempt it. I'll bring you back 2 stuffed teddy bears when we return. After contemplating for a moment, it reluctantly let go. Bruce sat in the passenger seat, fastening his seatbelt and asked me. What does my wife want to buy? I smiled and said. We'll see when we get there. Actually, I had prepared a gift for him. 6 years after graduation, I finally managed to squeeze into the group of people with $1 million annual salary. A long time ago, I had thought of getting something for Bruce. The car stopped by the commercial street in the city center, and I dragged Bruce straight to the first floor of SKP. Picked a watch for him, bought a pair of shoes, and then headed to the music store across the street. The band I had hired in advance was waiting there for us. You stay here, I have prepared a performance for you. Seeing Bruce obediently sitting on the chair, I stood up satisfactorily and sat at the nearby piano. As the first note fell, the guitar, bass, and drums joined in. Then, it was the song I had practiced hard for over 2 months. I hope from now on you only dream of my piano piece. The only piano piece written for you. After singing this song, Bruce still sat in place, not moving at all, just looking at me. His eyes were like a lake reflecting the sparkling sunlight. The band members voluntarily stepped back. I sat on the piano stool, cleared my throat, and said, Aren't you going to say something? He whispered. So, during the past period, you always came home late and told me you were working overtime, were you actually practicing this? Yes. I nodded. You don't know how much effort it takes for someone without a foundation to practice the piano. And this song was specially written by someone I hired, a science student, who poured all their artistic selves into it, even participated in writing the lyrics. I was quite satisfied with the final result, but I was afraid you wouldn't like it. I said, blushing. After all, you're a CEO, not lacking in money or material things. Giving you something else would seem insincere. Bruce stared at me unwaveringly. Did you see the harmonica in the cabinet? I nodded. Thanks to Verna's influence, the relationship between Bruce's mother and him had improved quite a bit. But the damage caused to Bruce by those indifferent years could never be completely erased. I just hoped he could be a little happier. Because he was my favorite person in the world. Pretending not to see Bruce using the flowers to cover his reddening eyes, I linked arms with him and walked back to the car. Bruce drove on the way back. Before we reached home, he purposely placed his hand on the steering wheel and took a few photos. And then, I immediately saw his updates on my social media feed, 3 in a row. A watch from my wife. Shoes bought by my wife. Flowers hand-wrapped by my wife. Verna couldn't hold back in the comments section. Damn, obsessed with love. Bruce acted like he didn't see it. He said he was going to the bedroom to take a shower, but there was no movement for quite some time. I watched half a movie downstairs, about to go upstairs to check on him, when I received a message from him. It was a photo and a voice message. A glimpse in the mirror of a semi-transparent black and white maid outfit. I had bought it before, but he had refused to wear it. I opened the voice message. The rope you've always wanted is at the door, come up. As I went upstairs, the lighting was dim and ambiguous. I thought to myself as I walked, so there are benefits to giving gifts. In the future, I should give more.